you have to be independent, especially in this world that requires you to many times make your own decisions without a lot of help. And so I always wanted to help people develop the skills and confidence and clarity so they can make decisions on their own with the resources that they have. And so how do you do that in financial planning and in financial services? I started digging into that. And one of the main questions I started asking myself was, why are people poor? And I started with that. And I learned a lot about that. Huge question. And I think the next evolution of that question and what led me to that I realized I never really asked was, why are people rich? That's the other side of the coin. And actually, they have sometimes the same answer.
Welcome to episode 68 of the Innovating Advice Show. I'm joined by Phuong Luong, founder of Just Wealth in the US. Phuong is a burst of inspiration. She's a career changer from teaching to financial planning. And when she decided to make the switch, she jumped right in and started her own virtual fee-only financial planning business. If you know someone that's considering a career switch into financial planning, this is a great episode to share with them. Phuong also shares her research and experience with financial history, wealth divides, and the myths we tell ourselves about why people are poor. We discuss some of the challenges with giving back through pro bono work and the most effective way for you and your clients to contribute charitable dollars. Phuong has won many awards and recognitions, but remains staunchly focused on leaving the world a better place than she found it. Links, show notes, and timestamps at innovatingadvice.com or directly through the link below. You're listening to the Innovating Advice Show, and I'm your host, Kate Holmes, bringing you the global pulse on financial services innovation, featuring financial planners, financial advisors, and related professionals from all corners of the globe. Let's dive in. Hi, Phuong. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Kate. It's such an honor to be here with you, and it's going to be really fun, I think, because I always enjoy speaking with you.
Oh, and I enjoy speaking with you, and I love your story, and we're going to be spending a lot of time on your story, kind of starting from the beginning. And one of the conversations we've been having in financial services for years now is, how do we attract more women to the profession? How do we attract more people of color to the profession? And it's been a conversation for a while, but it's really picking up steam during this pandemic. Thinking about, nurses that are obviously natural caregivers and like helping people. Can we attract some of them in? Teachers has been another big conversation. So, Phuong, you cover all of that as a woman, a person of color, and a teacher who has come into financial services. So I really want to start with, what was that initial transition like? Why did you leave teaching? And where did you go?
Yeah. So I taught for about 7 to 8 years, right, before I moved into financial services. And it seems like a big jump, but actually I was a personal finance nerd since I was a kid. And I really got deep into it in college, where I started thinking, okay, I'm going to be financially independent. I mean, I was financially independent in college, but I got scholarships, which was, important because I wouldn't have been able to go to college without that. But then when I was close to graduating, I realized, okay, I'm going to be on my own. How do I do this? I keep hearing from, upperclassmen that there's something called security deposit. There's something called last month's rent that you have to pay in the US, right? When you move into an apartment, you typically have to pay an upfront cost that sometimes you get back at the end, sometimes you don't when you leave the apartment. And I thought, how am I going to save that? And so I had to figure something out. And I was always really diligent about reading and self-learning, and none of this was ever taught in school. So I had to do my own reading and research. Yeah. And so I kept doing that as an adult in my first career as a teacher. And then when I started transitioning, I realized I want to make a bigger impact. I didn't feel like I was making the change I wanted to make in the classroom. And so I thought, okay, what else can I do? And I thought, okay, maybe financial services. So I started doing research, and I learned something called financial planning, where you actually get to meet with people and work with people. And that is I think my superpower, my skill set, and what I enjoy doing. And so that's why I moved into financial services.
That's awesome. And what were you teaching?
I had a master's I still have a master's in special education. And so I was a special education teacher in different roles. Sometimes I was working in the classroom with other teachers. Sometimes I had my own special education classroom where sometimes I took students out and gave specialized instruction. My last few years in the teaching profession, I was actually co-teaching, meaning it was me and another math teacher in the room teaching math. So I taught math, and I have a math certification as well. And so some students didn't even know that I was a special education teacher. They just thought I was just a regular teacher in there because I was working under something called an inclusion model, where students, are all special, they're all different, everyone belongs, everyone's learning uniquely. And I truly believe that, right? Actually, part of the reason I left the teaching profession was that I felt like we were over-labeling students as having special needs or having a disability when really they just learn differently, or they didn't have the same educational access as other students that were ahead of them in terms of testing.
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I'm just listening to all these skills that you had that clearly carry over so well and so seamlessly into financial services. And so when you were looking kind of to do that, you mentioned a bigger impact. Where did you then initially go?
Yeah, so I started working in a nonprofit, providing financial coaching and counseling to people living with low incomes or people living in subsidized housing, which is public housing, right? So government-sponsored housing. And it was really eye-opening for me because I always knew, even as a teacher, I knew about income inequality, wealth inequality. I didn't realize how stark it was, especially in the cities that I was working in. I was working in Boston at the time, which is quite an unequal city in terms of income and wealth, depending on the community that you're in, depending on your race, depending on your gender, depending on your immigration status, right, and how long your family's been in the country. Like it's really interesting because there's also a ton of education facilities, right, and a ton of wealth in Boston. So that's a part of the reason of that wealth inequality, because there's a lot of wealth but also a lot of poverty. And Boston was a really unique place to start my career in financial services because of that fact. And so I had a chance to do a few things in Boston, right? I was working with low-income populations, and there was also a really growing and burgeoning, but now really strong financial coaching and counseling community where people of low income can access services, right? And I was a part of that in the beginning. And at the same time, I was able to shadow and network and meet with financial planners who work with wealthy people. And that is where I learned about the certified financial planning designation. And that is where I got my certified financial planning designation and where I met many of my mentors. And what's so interesting is I've been in the room, I've been across the table, I've been at the same side of the table as people of all levels of wealth and income. And there are so many commonalities, but also so many differences of access, right? But a lot of commonalities in terms of the stress people feel around money, no matter how much you have.
Yep.
It's different stresses, right? And different access to solutions. But there's a lot of, like, what is enough for me? What do I want out of life? What does money mean to me? What's my next step? Everyone is asking these questions. And also there's a lot of shame that's involved around money, no matter your income and wealth. And it might be, a self-selecting bias because they're coming to get services. They're coming to see us as financial planners or as financial coaches and counselors. But that's something I learned, right? And so I started digging in deeper. Like, I'm always kind of someone who wants to figure out what's the thing that I can do so that people don't need my help.
Wow.
Because I don't want, and even when I was a teacher, I never wanted my students dependent on me because I always knew that, next year they're going to go off and they're going to be either on their own or with another teacher. And I don't know, and they don't know, if that teacher is going to provide the same level of service or be helpful to them, or if the material would be very difficult for them. And so, and sometimes they might move away out of our school district too, right? And so they're not in my care anymore. So you have to be independent, especially in this world that requires you to many times make your own decisions without a lot of help. And so I always wanted to help people develop the skills and confidence and clarity so they can make decisions on their own with the resources that they have. And so how do you do that in financial planning and in financial services? I started digging into that. And one of the main questions I started asking myself was, why are people poor? And I started with that, right? And I learned a lot about that. Huge question. And we could talk about that. And I think the next evolution of that question and what led me to that I realized I never really asked was, why are people rich? That's the other side of the coin.
Yes.
Right? And actually they have sometimes the same answer. So I'll leave it at that in case you can say, you can let me know which direction we want to go into.
Well, and I want to come back to that because those are two huge questions, and that'll touch on some of the things we're going to chat about in a minute.
Yeah.
And one of the other things I was thinking is with your experience of working in this nonprofit, so working with people that are on the lower income side, and also you mentioned mirroring people and having all those mentors in financial services and getting to see the wealthy clients. What were some of your initial impressions then of traditional financial services, financial advice, financial planning?
Wow. It really changed once I actually started meeting practitioners.
Yeah.
So as a child, I grew up in New York City, and the stereotype of Wall Street was definitely in my mind, right? Wall Street was just a subway right away. I'd walked around it as a kid, and I thought, this is not a place for me, right? This is a place where there's a lot of really loud people, mostly men, mostly white men, right? Like selling
loud
and making
New
a lot of money. Yeah, exactly. And I got the loud part, but everything else, like the wealth, I guess to summarize, I always felt it was a world for people who already had money that just want to make more of it.
Yes.
And I didn't see my place in that, like in terms of my own interests, but also my own identity. And once I started actually meeting financial planners, and I know the financial planning world is a subset of the financial world, right? There's many of us, but we're I feel like we are a minority. I don't know if that's true or not.
Yeah. True
Okay.
financial planners in the grander scheme of financial services. Yep, definitely.
Yeah. So that could be the difference, right? And so I didn't know about financial planning until very, very close to when I started making moves into the career, into the profession. But as some of the financial planners that I know and first met, like they're still mentors of mine, they're still friends of mine. They're just normal people that want to help others.
Yeah.
Right. And I realized, like, okay, I can work with this. Like, this is a community I can be a part of. So that was really amazing. And I was very lucky because the Financial Planning Association of Massachusetts is very strong. We had a very strong, I say had because I am not a part of it anymore because I've aged out, a very strong next gen community. I aged out for a while and then I moved out of Boston, right? And so I'm not in Boston anymore. So, but the people I still keep in touch with. And again, I still feel like it's really lucky because I didn't know about all the different resources, the different scholarships, the different ways of navigating a career and the different options that you have. You don't just have to work for a big firm, right? Or a firm at all. If you don't want to, if you want to start your own practice, you can.
And you did, which is also fascinating. So you had this kind of initial perception, which honestly, I grew up with the same perception, Wall Street. And even when I first entered financial services, I was working with wealthy people, and that inherently bothered me for the longest time. I was like, why are we just working with people that are already wealthy? We need to be working with people to help them get wealthy and identifying those barriers. And we'll chat about that. But you didn't go work for a large firm or even a small firm. Yeah. You went and jumped in and started your own virtual fee-only financial planning business. So how did you make that decision?
Yeah, it was a tough decision to make. And at the same time, it was really the only way for me to do what I wanted to do and to do financial planning the way I wanted to. What was incredibly helpful was that one of my mentors, he has since retired, a practice of his own, right? And at the time, he was thinking of taking on an apprentice, and he thought, okay, I'm going to take on someone to maybe help me figure out, do I want to scale back? Do I want to grow? I'm not sure. And two separate people told me about it and said, Phuong, you need to meet with this person, right? Because he's thinking about, building his practice or just doing something with it, but he wants to work with someone. And I think you'd be a good fit with together. We met and we really hit it off. And I started apprenticing with him and meeting with him regularly, right? Sometimes once a month, sometimes every other week, depending on our schedules. And I could see, and he had a solo practice, but he was a former teacher. And he taught workshops. And he teaches ethics workshops to other financial planners, actually. And so he would always give me mini ethics lessons, even during our shadow days, right? And he started showing me the underpinnings of his business, right? The CRM that he uses, he used Salesforce at the time, right? All the technology, all the software. And we attended software demos together, and he would ask great questions. And it was just like this in education where like, if you watch an expert do something, you can learn at an accelerated rate versus just learning something on your own. And that was the experience that I was able to get. And I hope to pass that on to someone someday. And that was invaluable for me to see. And he's the one that encouraged me, you can do this. I was always really nervous, of course, right? But he said, you can do this. And he worked, and here's the key. He never managed assets. He just advised people. He had a long career in financial services. He was one of the first CFPs ever, right? That gets certified. But he didn't charge assets under management. He only provided hourly advice. He was a pure financial planner. So that's what I do. And my practice has changed a little bit, especially during a course of capacity, because it's so accessible and there's not as many people that provide this type of service to people without requiring an income or asset minimum.
Yeah.
So it is more accessible to general population than others. And so I think that helps with the accessibility, and it helps grow a business like mine that doesn't have a whole marketing machine.
Well, and I like how you started out by saying it was sort of your only option because there was no one else out there doing it. And that's what we're seeing more and more. And I'm having that conversation a lot, even multiple times this week alone, with people that are, in bigger firms often, and they're kind of saying, hey, like this business just isn't doing what I want to do. How can I break out? But so often people, and women especially, encounter, I don't know, like a lack of confidence. And I think once you're sort of in the machine for a long time, it can be harder to break out of that and just get that confidence and say, yes, I can do this. This is possible. So, even though you didn't come from that big firm, any advice for those people, and the women especially, that are trying to decide if they should go out on their own and build the business that they want to see?
Yeah, it's income is a real thing. All right. And I think that is the main barrier for a lot of people. I mean, other barriers could be, like you said, self-confidence, not sure if you're able to succeed, but success sometimes often means it translates to, I'm not sure if I'll be able to make the income I need to make to support myself and my family. That's usually the barrier, right? And we can see that the number of entrepreneurs, or most entrepreneurs, and also most people go into the creative field that also has variable income and no guarantee of success, and also the academic fields, tend to come from families that can support them financially, or have partners that can support them financially, or have inheritances that can do that, right? And so I had to build my own, I never thought about this, but I had to build my own inheritance, right? And I saved, and I always maintained some part-time income. And so I also am a financial planning facilitator. Basically, I help students through the online financial planning program for one of the registered programs in the US. And that has been amazing. I actually went through the program myself. It was really nice. Yeah. And so when I told the program director that I was leaving my job to start a practice, she said, oh my gosh, Phuong, like, congratulations. And there's an opportunity that might come up, and I will let you know. Right. And so, so here's one advice: tell everybody you know that you're going to start a practice. Right. And take time to build your network before you make that jump. Right. I know it can be difficult. And again, I was so lucky that I was in Boston, big city, a lot of access to networking opportunities, a lot of people, period. You need people to have a networking opportunity. Now, in the time of the pandemic, there's a lot more virtual gatherings that are happening as well. It could be harder to make a connection there, especially since you're in a group and it's hard to go off on your own to have one-on-one conversation. But reach out, schedule something, have a conversation, send emails, send questions and emails if they're not able to have a phone call with you. But I'm noticing more and more that people nowadays, if they're not young parents, right, they typically have more time now to grab a coffee because they don't have to travel. So that was always a really hard thing for the people that you want to talk to. Like, actually meeting is difficult, but now more people are getting more comfortable with Zoom. So part-time income, do the networking before you jump, access your network. I think we are the power of our networks, right? Our combined power. And I think part of the difficulty with women, and especially people of color and women of color, is that we don't have a lot of built-in network in financial services yet. We're definitely underrepresented. It's really difficult. And I can't speak to the experience of Black and brown people, right? Other than myself, I'm Asian, but I'm also light-skinned Asian. And I have a different experience in the industry than some of my other peers that are darker skinned, that are Black or brown, and that experience racism in a different way. there are stereotypes of Asian people in financial services, but they generally are positive for my role. We're good at math and we're good at money.
Right.
And that serves me very well. I did not really think about that going into it, but it's helped me. And I can't deny that. And it's important to say. And so the advice that I'm giving, is specific to me. Not everyone may have that same ease that I've had, although there has been difficulty at the same time. One is that I grew up very poor. And the rhetoric and discourse around wealth in financial services continues to make me very uncomfortable sometimes, right? Blaming people and individuals for their lack of wealth, not thinking about the greater systems that hold people back, thinking that financial services is the end-all be-all as a solution for global poverty is, I think, very problematic.
Yeah.
And so that makes it difficult for me to fit in certain communities and spaces because either I'll shut down, or when I was younger, I would speak up, right? And I still do, but I think I'm more careful now about what spaces I'm in, and to save my energy. Not that I don't want to make change, but sometimes I know where to pick my battles now. And I used to just say anything, right, to anybody, and I hope it made a difference then, but it also took a toll on me emotionally. So I guess that's my other advice too, is like, be careful with your energy and where you put it. Right. And so if an avenue is not working, if you're trying to create a mentoring relationship, if you're trying to create an opportunity for yourself and you're hitting a wall, diversify. And that's what we know as financial planners, right? It's important to diversify.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's all great advice. And we even talked with Eric Roberge, who's also from Boston. And we talked a lot about when he started his business, he was a part-time waiter. So, not having that ego behind it of, hey, I have to jump in and make money from day one. If you have a long enough runway to be able to plan that can work out fantastically. But taking it slow and steady. And I love that your part-time job is actually giving back to the profession. So you kind of get the best of all worlds there, having that extra income, giving back, continuing to build other people's networks with you in them. That's amazing. And for anyone thinking, again, hey, maybe I'm a career changer. Maybe I'm new to this profession. Yes. How's this all going to work? You started this a few years ago and you were a 2019 Women to Watch Rising Star, 40 under 40, young advisor to watch. You're the chair of CFP Board's Council on Education. You're on CFP Board's Diversity Advisory Group. You've had all these great accomplishments, and you should absolutely, make sure to pause to acknowledge that. And I acknowledge that in you. I saw something. You came up on my iPad in my Apple News right a few weeks ago, and I took a screenshot, and I was so proud of you, just seeing you everywhere and these great things you've done and the amazing example that you are to so many other people. And one of the things, and you said this earlier about going to college, having that scholarship. And I know you've also received multiple other scholarships. So how impactful has that been to you and your career and everything you've built?
Thank you for saying all that. And I guess that could be another piece of advice that I need to listen to, like celebrate your successes.
Yeah.
Like I don't typically do that. That is an exhausting list that you just said, but it is. And I'm humbled. I'm truly humbled by all of that. And I still doubt myself even with all of that stuff. And we can talk about it later too. But it's like, who is that, right? Like the celebration and the recognition. It's tricky. It's tricky balance. And for people with imposter syndrome, that points more toward digging yourself more in a hole, thinking I don't really deserve that. And I battle that every day. Yeah. Like, oh, they don't really know me. They don't really know. Right? Like they think I'm great, and then I have to like shut it out sometimes. Yep. And friends and the network again the network is there. They're not just for income producing activities. They're also for emotional healing. Right? That's what your network's for. And I'll also say Eric Robert is one of the people that was super helpful to me in the beginning, meeting with me. And he said, why not? Why can't you start your own practice? This was years before I started. Yeah. I said, but I'm not ready. And he said, why not? And I was like, you're right. Why not? I need to figure that out. Financial planners are good at asking questions, and so is Eric. So the question of the scholarships, super helpful, super impactful. Anything that you do, especially as a career changer, is going to involve risks. It's going to involve time investment and also monetary investment. And the time investment, that is something you need to work out. But the monetary investment, it was huge because I didn't have to take on, because I was still working full time while I was learning my certified financial planning degree. I was paying student loans from college as well. And so it allowed me not to have another part-time job. I'm the kind of person, I was the kid that always had multiple jobs, even in college. And studying for the CFP, Certified Financial Plan Designation, for anyone that knows, is like a part-time job.
Yeah.
Depending on the pay. Yeah.
I think it can be a full-time job if you do it too fast.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And if I was a parent at the time, I don't know if I was caregiving for anyone, right? I don't know how I would have done it in the time parameters that it requires. And people do it all the time. I hear their stories as the chair of the Council of Education, and it's amazing to me. People are so resilient. People do it, and the scholarship helped that much because that was a time investment for me.
Yep.
But I didn't have to devote my energy and time elsewhere to earn that same income and devote savings to it, right? And so it's huge. It's a huge thing. And it goes over that mental hurdle because for me, spending money on something is very difficult. This might be a trait of many financial planners, right? We're very careful, right? And so you want to do the cost in the ROI in your head of like, is this something that I can do? Is this something that's worth it? And this wasn't exactly my position, but in a way it was. You're always calculating, okay, is this worth it? But sometimes it's not in your control, especially if there's an emergency that pops up, right? And so for people that I know that are thinking about the CFP or thinking about any other kind of career change or going back to school, you always have to weigh the cost benefit analysis of like, am I going to be able to support my family if I devote this money to this endeavor that could pay off later, but it's delayed payoff?
Yeah.
Can I float myself during that period of time while I'm devoting my energy and my money toward this investment? And sometimes the choice answers itself, right? It's like, no, I have to take care of my family now or take care of myself now. And the scholarships are huge.
Yeah. And thankfully, we're seeing more and more of them popping up all over the world to attend conferences. I spoke at a conference earlier this week and I got a note from one of the large companies and they said, hey, we're providing financial assistance to make sure anyone who wants to attend this conference can. And I thought that's really great. So just knowing how important that is to so many people. And that was a great way of putting it, kind of looking at, do you then have to work harder or work more hours in that part-time job if that's what you're doing, taking that time away from putting into education or networking, and just having that network also to let you know which scholarships are available is a super important thing because they're not always posted on the front page of your email or social media. So knowing all that stuff. And
I'll say one thing to that too. You got to apply because you never know.
Yes.
I'll tell you, one time I was on a scholarship committee for, and there was only one person that applied, and so they got it. So that happens. I hear that happening a lot. Either there was no one that applies, or only one or two people apply, and sometimes we just give it to both people because they made the effort to apply.
Yeah,
apply. Why not
apply? Everyone listening, apply. Well, and that could go back to an ego thing too, right? I mean, it's easy to say, hey, and so, I want to shift into those conversations on why are people poor? Why are people rich? But then I also, with that, it's mentally poor or mentally rich, right? Do you think that you're worthy of the scholarship or are you taking it from somewhere else? And all. So circling back to our earlier conversation on why are people poor and why are people rich? We need to spend a few minutes on that.
Yes. So those are heavy questions, and we're not going to be able to cover all of it, but a framework that I found helpful, right? You mentioned mindset. So we've also talked about history, right? And systemic and structural issues. And I found that whenever we're talking about a big topic like wealth inequality, and, for your listeners who are, and many are outside the US as well, right? Is inside the US. I'm not sure if others know this, but wealth inequality, especially between different races, is a huge topic right now. Everybody's talking about it, even in financial services, right? Where for people, even when I say even in financial services, I mean even financial planners who traditionally don't have communication or work with people low income. It's still in the mindsets, right? It's still an understood topic that people are recognizing is an issue because that decreases the diversity of the profession and also decreases the diversity of our client pool.
Yep.
When there's such huge wealth disparity. And a helpful framework that I found is thinking about things in terms of different levels. And so you can think about things in terms of, internalized. That's the mindset, right? Internalized poverty, racism, any of that, where the issue of poverty or racism is turned inward. It's kind of like imposter syndrome, right? I mean, it could be because I'm a woman, it could be because I'm a woman of color, but it's turned inward, right? Because I'm thinking, okay, I can't apply for this, or I can't apply for this job, or I'm not going to ask for that raise because I'm not going to get it anyway, right? That's when you start getting something called learned helplessness, is when you just give up because you've tried so many times before, or you've seen other people trying and failing, maybe other people in your community or people that look like you, and you don't see models of success. So that's internalized blank. And then there's interpersonal. So now we're moving to the bird's eye view, right? But that's the next level is interpersonal. So you could experience relative poverty and wealth. So you could feel poor compared to another person that has more money than you. That happens a lot, right? Keeping up with the Joneses.
Yeah.
You could also feel that someone aggressed against you, right? Maybe they said something racist or said something biased that upset you, or pointed to their own ignorance, or something that was xenophobic, right? That's interpersonal. And then once we get to the third level, it's really high up there, institutional. It's when those internalized issues and the interpersonal issues become solidified in cultural norms, in financial rules, tax rules, and how money is distributed globally, or even within a country, and to who, and who doesn't have access to it, and the ways of building wealth. And of poverty and racism, it's very hard to separate, right? In the US, definitely, because that's where my experience comes in. I think there's a global context to this too that is applicable, right? From what we're talking about.
Yes.
The the internalized, the interpersonal, and the institutional cannot be ignored. So when we talk about mindsets, I bristle a little bit, right, when someone says that, because oftentimes when someone brings up mindset, like, well, yeah, but poor people are poor because, they don't save. Someone actually said this to me at a wedding. They said, yeah, but, great what you do, so noble. But do you advise people not to always buy the latest iPhone? and I don't remember what I said. I might have gone white, right, with like rage blindness, like after talking to him so much, right, about like the struggles and the people, and that's what he brings up, right? Like the issue I have with the mindset conversation, I'm not saying it's not a part of this whole discussion, but it's not the only part of the discussion. And if you use that as a rebuttal to negate interpersonal and institutional issues, then we're not having the same conversation. It's all of these things. And, the question, I think the next thing is, once you recognize that, then where are your specific skills and gifts? Where can they be used to make the most change? If you want to make change, right? And I still think about that. I don't have the exact answer yet, but I try to do that through my work.
Well, there's, a lot going on there, and those are really big issues. And is that kind of, I'm just going to paint a broad stroke here, knowing how many challenges are behind that, especially when you get into, systemic issues and barriers that people face to achieving wealth. Is that why most people have kind of taken the easy road, and it is easy to just work with the people that are already wealthy and just help the rich get richer? Because that's the easy thing to do.
Yeah, it could be. And when you say easy, it's also like it, and like sometimes when people hear the word easy, and I do this too, right? You think lazy, you think like, okay, that's the lazy road, right? You can, because it was just there for you.
Right.
Some of the most hardest working people I know are people who are wealth managers and financial planners. And so it's not that they're lazy.
Oh, no,
I'll say
right.
Yeah. Oh no, I'm not saying you're saying that either, Kate. When I talk about institutionalized, right? It means the road has been paved. It means there are systems and businesses and job openings and career pathways that have already been trailed, that are codified, that exist already for you to just pop into. Not to say that it's easy to pop into, right? I don't mean this, but they're there for you. The other thing is that the mechanisms to build wealth is easy to access for people who already have wealth. Right. It takes money to make money, right? People say that. And I didn't realize how true that was until I became a financial planner.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to think, what are some of the things that financial advisors and financial planners can do to help you? I mean, you've dedicated so much of your career to helping people that are more on the underserved spectrum. And you've done that in a way that has built, a successful business, and you're working on some other ways of making a bigger impact. But what actions can people that aren't a big firm do? And I'm working with some big firms to kind of say, hey, how can we make advice more accessible? And thankfully, there are new fee models out, and technology helps with all that. But what advice would you have?
So I would say, so different things. One is that if there are financial planners that want to get involved and want to help people of lower income or lower wealth, it doesn't always mean that you have to work with them, right? Because I see that effort a lot, right? Oh, I'm going to do some pro bono. I want to do more pro bono. And the tricky thing with that is we know very well as financial planners that there are many things we know and many things we don't know. And it's important to be clear on that. And actually, that was another piece of advice, right, that I should share, is that you have to be really clear on that and be really clear with yourself and also with your clients, because you can't build a business with trying to serve everybody. And I think financial planners know this, right? And like, you don't have to niche so specifically, but you're going to drive yourself mad if you try to know everything for every type of situation in the financial world that could happen. And that's the same thing, not just for people who have wealth, but people who don't have wealth. Because people who don't have wealth are under different rules, but they also have rules that are over them regarding their income, their public benefits, their housing, and the resources they have access to. So providing pro bono services where your training has predominantly been with people who have income and wealth and other resources and really are in charge of their own financial situations and don't have government rules other than taxes, of course. There's a lot of rules there, but there are different rules for people of different economic means. And so being aware of that is really hard. And so pro bono, it's a tricky thing unless you have experience working with that population. And usually even then it's super local, super specific to the location. Yeah, right. In the US, we have a very antiquated state-based system, right, of different rules and laws. It could, with even across a state line, which is I could just step over, right, under a totally different structure of how I could lose public benefits or lose certain government programs if I make too much income or if I have too much in savings. And then another issue, right, is giving, right? And so that is an area that I think financial planners can make a lot of change in. A lot of times we're advising clients on giving and where to, contribute charitable dollars. And from what I've read from, people who have done the research on this, direct cash transfers and cash giving is the thing. It is the most efficient way to give aid, and is the most efficient way to make an impact on someone's life and change an entire community, just giving cash. And there are organizations for that I can share with you if you want to share it with the podcast as well, right? That's a huge, huge thing. And not just on an international basis, although that's where most of the research has been, but there are pilot programs happening in the US, and they're showing great results that, surprisingly, well, I say that sarcastically, not a surprise, I should say, because I know sarcasm doesn't always translate, right, to an international podcast. Not surprisingly, people are saving that money. They're using it for education. They're paying for education for themselves or their families. They're building businesses. They're not doing all the things that people are scared of, like wasting it on alcohol or other things that people deem inappropriate or irresponsible. Right?
Yeah.
They're building wealth for themselves, either through community or through monetary wealth. And that's where those cash transfers are going. And so I really am a firm believer in it. I hope more aid and more giving moves in that direction, because it's just more efficient and you can make more impact with it. And also just to learn about the history of what we're talking about the institutional stuff. Because we're a lot of diversity and equity inclusion programs talk about the interpersonal racism that people experience in the workplace or, in their lives. Rarely does it delve into the internalized. That's a really tricky area. But I think there's a lot of work that can also be done in the institutionalized education, right? How are the systems that we're a part of? How are the laws that we're also, that we can impact, that we can actually change? And how are our companies and businesses perpetuating these inequalities, and what can we do about it?
Yeah, and we could go for quite a while longer. I've got a lot of other questions. This might have to be a two-part episode, because I'm just thinking of all the ways that we can, impact things, and thinking back to that nonprofit that you worked at, right? Having kind of that stepping stone, because I'm not saying financial planners should just go out and, not make any money and just work with people that don't have money. That's not the answer.
No.
But it's how can we help people move through the system? And, I'm going to make an assumption here, but, starting with like that nonprofit that you worked with, right? Working with those community nonprofits, the NGOs, the companies that are there to help, and then, prepare people to kind of continue moving down the ladder than having financial planners that work with lower income. And then, as people's situations get more complex throughout time, or if they do build more wealth, then maybe moving along, but knowing that we need more of those stepping stones along the way and more rungs on that ladder to help people move along.
Yeah, thank you for summarizing it that way. And an important thing that I learned from my experience in the nonprofit was that I was only as strong as a financial counselor as the social programs available to me and my clients to help them with. I couldn't connect them to a wealth building mechanism if one didn't exist. And actually, we found that there was difficulty because what we tried to do is expand to other states. And it was so hard because Massachusetts, again, another reason I'm lucky in my career is that there were a lot of programs for people in terms of first-time homebuyer programs for people that don't have the means to pay for a large down payment, first-time homebuyer mortgages that have lower interest rates, and income provisions for people to give them a boost if they couldn't make their mortgage payments for the first several years, and a lot of different nonprofits, a big nonprofit community that had varying satellite services, right? Not just in financial counseling. Other states definitely don't have that same ecosystem.
Yeah.
And so it was, again, the community model, understanding what the resources are available. It wasn't just the education that allowed people to move forward. The education was only one part of it, but you had to have the access and the resources to make a change, even with the education that you have.
And speaking of making a change, I mean, that's what you're doing, right? You've taken your career as a teacher and you're like, I want to do something bigger. You went to the nonprofit. You're like, I still want to help people in a different way. You just went and started your own business, and we'll tease something for the next episode, but you're working on something even bigger than that to make a difference. So, overall, to me, it's a lesson to listeners that are thinking, hey, what am I capable of? What can I do? Phuong, you're just an amazing example of continuing to make a difference, continuing to put more goodness out there into the world, and doing it in a way that still builds a great life for you and building a profitable business. And there's a way to do it all. So amazing encouragement and inspiration for others to go out there in whatever path they take. And that's the thing. Everybody's path is different. Every journey is different. Every end destination is different. And that's what makes the world beautiful.
Thank you so much, Kate. Yes, I really appreciate you saying that. I really appreciate all the excellent questions, and I'd love to come back. Yeah, and to continue. I mean, any chance to talk to you again, I would be awesome.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, we'll make that happen. Thank you, Phuong.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Innovating Advice Show. If you're wondering where to start, head to innovatingadvice.com/start for a short video series walking you through 3 steps to identify opportunities for innovation in your financial advice or financial planning business. Again, that's innovatingadvice.com/start.